Welcome to Module 6. We are in now a more modern phase of psychotherapy, postmodern and social constructivist theories in counseling. We're going to go over basic assumptions, key concepts, role of the counselor, primary techniques, multicultural considerations of selected social constructivist theories. There's so many of them. We're just going to select a few of the postmodern theories. The D2L content that you have includes this introductory video and the introductory PowerPoint that you're seeing in this video. There's some reading that will need to be done. We have video as well, but there is assigned reading here. The text that you're reading from is a feminist perspectives in therapy by Worrell and Rimmer, and it talks about empowerment feminist therapy, which is a brand of feminist therapy that is one of the social constructivist psychotherapies. Also in D2L, you will find instructions about getting to Appendix C that you will need to have before you finish Assignment 2. The video includes another postmodern therapy called solution-focused therapy, SFBT, more acronyms for you here. And the video can be accessed via the directions for study document. The text is located in the D2L section, and the video is going to be located in the ETSU Shared Library eMedia section. There are 2 weeks also in this module with two different initial post deadlines that you see here. And there's a little something different about this discussion area. The requirements are that you have to post about each of 3 therapies to get the maximum number of points, plus you have to post outside your group. So there will be 3 different categories, and you'll see them in your discussions for study document. And you will need to post something about each one of those 3 in order to gain the maximum points in the discussion area. Let's talk about the assessment for Module 6, which starts Friday at noon on November 15th. And it's got 18 multiple choice and a couple of true-false. And in this, the content of the assessment, you're going to want to know how these postmodern theories actually differ with the older theories. And that is basically that they are very critical of knowledge that's just taken for granted. I mean, we're looking at new social constructs, or we're not looking at new social constructs, we're looking newly for the first time in therapy at social constructs and how they affect a person's growth and emotional healing. The second thing is use of language is extremely key in these therapies. You're watching very, very closely how you label things, how you identify things. For instance, a 16-year-old would be called a young woman, not a girl, just to empower her into womanhood. Just an example on the language. Reality is a function of social context. That's another way this is different. And it's very activist-oriented, too. And the theory behind that is that knowledge and social action go together. In other words, if you know we're ruining the environment, that means that you got to do something about it. And that's the social constructivist piece of this. There's some language that you're going to need to know on the assessment as well, like what is androcentric, intrapsychic, and deterministic theories. What does that mean? What do those 3 words mean? And that'll be found in your text that you're going to be reading from D2L, the feminist text. Now, in the text, what you're going to find is how empowerment feminist therapists actually integrate other therapies into their work with their client. And the example that's given in the text that's located in D2L from Worrell and Rimmer is how it matches up, or how it integrates, I should say, not matches up, but how it integrates with cognitive behavioral therapy. And in these therapies, these folks they're not called founders anymore. They're called contributors. Difference in the language there, because they are contributing different models and different ideas to the therapy. So you'll have contributors there. Just want to quickly go over some of the principles of empowerment feminist therapy. First, that the personal and social identities are interdependent and they're learned through socialization. As long as we buy dolls for little girls and toy guns for little boys, you see how that learning at an early age is going to create how someone is in their world. And that the personal is political, and that basically what that means is if we hope to bring about individual change, we must start with social change as well. In other words, you can't just change the individual and send them back into the same environment and have real change. Makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And also that any forms of devaluation, all forms of oppression, and institutionalized discrimination of people based on gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, physical characteristics, age, socioeconomic status, and that these things are the main source of client issues. The personal is political. Relationships are egalitarian. There's no one-up person's ship on the part of the therapist. The therapist is an equal person in the session, with the client being the author of their own life. And the fourth principle is that women's perspectives are valued in this therapy. Now, there are male feminist therapists, there are female feminist therapists, there are heterosexual and homosexual feminist therapists. The person's identity is not as important as their system of openness and belief in feminist theory, okay? So it is really most closely associated with the best of the multicultural strengths of all the theories because of the egalitarian look and the view of diversity being valued. So multiculturally, it is the strongest of all the theories. I mentioned earlier all types of oppression are recognized. There's power analysis as a technique and gender role analysis as a technique. The counselor is usually an advocate, a mentor, an activist for and with the client. And the goals in counseling have to do with the balancing of gender roles and the balancing of independence and interdependence, that balance. Also, a goal is empowerment and an affirmation of the client. Let's talk about narrative therapy just a second. Michael White introduced narrative therapy as a contributor, and it is sort of a carry-on from feminist therapy in that it talks about the concept, the context of someone's life, that the problem-saturated stories come from context. The key phrase in narrative therapy for you to remember is, the person is not the problem. The problem is the problem. So you really look into the problems, and especially those that are socially contextual. And the issue here that we stay attached to our stories, we can't move out of our comfort zones into a new story in order to change the things that need to be changed in our lives. The techniques are listed here. One that I would cover with you is letter writing, a very lengthy process that narrative therapy asks for, and that is when the therapist finishes with the client in session, the therapist actually sits down and writes a letter about the progress or about whatever has come up in the session to review for the next session. So it can be time-consuming to practice narrative therapy. The role of the counselor is to approach the client with a not knowing, I don't know, I cannot appreciate because I'm not in your body, in your social context exactly what's happening with you. Tell me about that. And of course that the client is the expert on her or his life. Now, solution-focused therapy is the one you're going to see the video of. And it's very, very popular now, simply, honestly, from the insurance payment standpoint, trying to reduce the number of sessions. Solution-focused really gives you a way to, as one of my friends calls it, G to the P. I mean, just get to the point. In fact, one of the first things that a solution-focused therapist would ask a client when they came in was, well, let's see, you made this appointment a week ago. How have things improved for you in that week? So it's focused on the positive. It's easy to do. You look for exceptions to a problem. You do some scaling, in terms of how it's changed this week and on 1 to 10. I mean, what is that? And what will it take us to, if it's 5 now, what will it take us to get to 8, let's say, okay, and setting that up. And actually, termination begins in the first session, so that you're asking the client at the end of our time together, what is it you would like to change? How would you like to have this issue changed, okay? And there are similarities with this. You know, Adler, back in, the early 1900s, was a proponent of let's act as if. That's what this is. And then Glasser's reality therapy is also very similar to solution-focused. I think you'll enjoy seeing the video of this. So from a multicultural consideration standpoint, definitely the postmodern and social constructivist theories have some good strengths. It's congruent with the philosophy of multiculturalism, for one thing. And multiple realities and individually perceived truths of the client. It's really a good fit in that. But of all the theories presented, really the feminist theoretical approach has the most in common with the multicultural strengths in social justice areas. Now, some shortcomings are, every culture does not hold this right to self-determination. In other words, I've got to be what my culture tells me to be. I've got to be what my family says I need to be. So certainly that would not work with someone of that belief. And then the therapist has to be aware of the cultural values of the client and of their own cultural values, and not impose, which is so easy to do if you have a strong belief in something. Some clients may actually believe that the therapist is, I'm paying you to be the expert, although that's never worked for me. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of the multicultural considerations for these theories. So be sure you know the basic assumptions, the founders, the key concepts, founders, not founders, contributors, sorry about that, the key concepts, the role of the therapist, and the multicultural considerations, and enjoy your time in Module 6. Thanks.